So, if you're afraid to repeat yourself online in your social media posts, on YouTube, across your podcast, and all these different places, I have a bit of a news flash for you. People aren't going to get bored with your content. Vast majority of the time, they aren't even seeing your content in the first place. This idea of, I already said it once, so I'm not going to say it again, is costing you sales, visibility, reach, engagement, and most importantly, your credibility. So, if you have this fear of repeating yourself online when it comes to growing your brand, building your business, or creating content, I used to feel the exact same way. And I've had quite a few revelations over the years, with the biggest one being that I am the only person that sees every single piece of content and cares about every single piece of content that I create. And no one is actually paying as much attention to my content as I do. And once I leaned into repeating myself online, I was able to drive home my key messages. I was able to increase sales, engagement, like literally anything and everything when it comes to these problem areas when marketing our businesses online have started to vanish. And repetition is actually the key to sustainable growth on social media and sustainable content creation for your business. First, we need to talk about why repetition equals recognition and why it's so important for you on social media. So, a few myths that I want to bust for you really quick. A lot of the times I hear from clients that they'll say something along the lines, what if my audience does notice? What if they've already seen that content or that message? And I always come back to them with this harsh and sad truth, but it's the truth nonetheless, that 90% of the time, your content is not going to actually be shown to your audience because of an algorithm, because of the time that they were sitting down to open their email or scroll online. Vast majority of the time, they are actually missing your content. So in order to combat that, you need to repeat yourself over and over and over again. You can keep it fresh and try out new content types, new content formats, and spin the messaging in different ways. But that messaging needs to be driven home to everybody in your audience. So the more that you talk about it, the more likely it is they're going to see it, resonate with it, and maybe even purchase from you. And then the second thing that I often hear is that, will my audience get tired of hearing the same thing over and over again if they do notice or if I repeat myself too often? And again, I want to combat that in saying that instead of getting bored or dissatisfied with your content, they are actually going to gain clarity. Repetition is going to give them confidence in your messaging, in the fact that you are an expert in what you say that you are. You are the person, the go-to in your niche, and that should be the reason why they want to work with you. They want to consume more of your content because you know what you're talking about. Whereas if your messaging is all over the place and is a little bit scatterbrained, they aren't going to find the confidence and the clarity in your content in order to follow you in the next step of whatever process you want them to take after they've consumed your content. Now, listen, these concerns are very valid if you have thought them before. But there is an origin of this fear that we need to address and talk about, because we think that repetition automatically equals that we are annoying. We often associate this negative connotation of repetition to what we're creating online. It comes from wanting our content to be perfect, so maybe you fall into the bucket of perfectionism. Or it comes from the pressure of constant novelty that we often associate with social media. We always want new, and fresh. And here's the way that you can combat this. If you are more in the perfectionist side of this, the perfectionist bucket, repetition is actually going to help you combat some of that perfectionism. You can take the same key messaging and tailor it to different platforms, different content types. Maybe one day it's a carousel and the next it's an Instagram story. So it's actually going to help you put the content out into the world without having to overanalyze every single little detail that you're saying. And then this is also going to help with the novelty issue, that you can take the same key message and deliver it with a new trend or deliver it as a new piece of content on a different platform that maybe you've been wanting to try. You can take that core message, that core content idea, the core whatever it is in who you are and what you do, and you can adjust your content accordingly. And truthfully, your audience is actually going to appreciate the consistency in which you're not only creating content, but reminding them of the things that they might need to do. It gives them some type of action to take, whether it is to implement whatever you're talking about in your content or to take that next step in the process of actually working with you. There's a lot of marketing theory and marketing tactics and marketing psychology that goes into this, but it is known that people need to see things a certain amount of times before they take action in the next step of the process. Or truthfully, with the onslaught of content that we are consuming, with the things we have going on in our daily lives, people tend to forget your content. So the more that you talk about the things that matter most to you in your business, is just only going to help your audience more. So let's talk about worst case scenarios here in terms of repetition. Let's say somebody does see your content twice. Let's say they did notice, they said something. I always tell people, who cares? Truthfully, why does it matter if somebody has seen that piece of content or seen that message once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times? What that's telling me is that that is a super fan in your audience. They have consumed your content enough to know that, hey, she's repeating herself here, or maybe she's reposting this piece of content here. Truthfully, I don't think it matters. And if anything, that's just a testament to your consistency and to your brand. Now, the second worst case scenario is that somebody might actually unfollow you. And again, if somebody unfollows you because that you are repeating yourself often, I actually think it's a good thing, because that person is actually not a part of your community. If they're sick and tired of hearing your messaging and your expertise, that person truthfully probably would never follow along in the customer journey with you. They aren't going to take the next steps to become a client. They aren't going to be that person that comments or engages or shares your content. And truthfully, bye, be gone. Like, who cares if that person unfollows? They weren't your person to begin with. So now let's talk about repetition actually as a strategy. So there's a very common marketing theory, and I think it dates back to the 80s, and it might be a bit outdated today, but I think the sentiment is there, and that's the marketing rule of 7, which basically states that vast majority of people need to see, hear, listen to your content, hear about your offers, your product at least 7 times before they decide to make a buying decision or a next step in your customer journey process. Yes, there are always going to be people who need more than 7 touch points and sometimes less than 7 touch points. And it's also going to depend on your niche, your industry, how expensive your products or services are, or how inexpensive your products and services are. But this is just a general rule of thumb to help shift your perspective, in that sometimes people need to hear things more than once in order to make a decision to move forward with your brand. And it's not just the repetition that gets them to buy. You could technically talk about your product for 7 days in a row, and that person, whoever's seen maybe all 7 posts, they still might not buy. But what repetition does is it makes you a more familiar face. It makes your brand a more familiar brand. And familiarity is what breeds trust with your audience and with consumers and with potential buyers. Because the thing with repetition is it often leads to retention, meaning people stay around, stick around a little bit longer, which then leads to recognition. So you want to start bringing them through those 3 stages. And that's why repetition is actually very, very strategic. And since you're building a brand, you're building a business, people need to hear about it often in order to believe in it. And I'll give you an example using my very own content ecosystem and why this works really well, not only for me as the person creating the content, but it works so well for my audience as well. I don't think in just terms of content creation when it comes to repetition. I think about content multiplication. So how can I take one idea, one piece of core messaging, and get it out in as many ways as possible, in as many formats, on as many platforms as I can, so that my person, my ideal audience member, can consume it in the best way for them. So how I implement repetition as a strategy is actually through my very own content ecosystem in something that I like to call the hero content strategy. And very simply put, what I like to do is take one of my core messages, my core beliefs, my core values, my expertise, like anything that has to do with me and what I stand for as a content strategist, and I create a YouTube video about it. I create a long form piece of content where I can yip and yap and explain, again, the reason why you're watching this right now. But what I can do with this video is then break it down into other pieces of content, repeating the same core message, but delivering it in different formats, because not everybody likes to watch long form YouTube videos like you are right now. Some people will want to enjoy this content as a newsletter that I'll send out to my entire email list. Some people might want to read it as a blog. So what I do is I take the transcript of this YouTube video and kind of play with it, mold it to fit that kind of like text written format. Sometimes I'll pull clips directly from this YouTube video and put it out as short form video content. Or sometimes I take the things that I'm saying in the YouTube video and turn it into carousels or text for threads. Sometimes it becomes a Pinterest pin. It all depends. But with that core idea in mind, I am repeating myself throughout all major social media platforms and all major marketing platforms so that, again, my ideal customer can consume this content in multiple ways or in a way that they prefer. So now we need to talk about how you're actually going to implement repetition in your content. And it actually comes down to content repurposing, which I've already alluded to, but basically it's just taking one piece of content and expanding the life of it. This is the easiest way to effectively and strategically repeat yourself because it's not going to come naturally to you if you try and sit down every single day and repeat yourself on social media with new content ideas and things like that. But instead, there are 3 strategic ways that you can repurpose your content. And again, this is a very common content marketing theory. I've just adapted it a little bit to make it easier for us small business owners. And that's reposting your content, reusing your content, and repurposing your content. And this is something that I like to call the 3 R's. And this framework is actually pretty easy to follow, with each of these having different goals and different skill levels, if you will. So first, let's talk about reposting content. And this is literally posting the same thing again and again and again. So with reposting, you are simply either on the same platform. So let's say I created an Instagram post 6 months ago. I am literally grabbing the same visual, the same graphic, the same video, whatever I had posted, and I am simply putting it out on Instagram again, exactly in the same way. Sometimes I might adjust the caption a little bit. Sometimes I might lean into new Instagram features like tagging a location or adding music or something like that. But what this should entail is that it shouldn't take you any time at all to grab an old piece of content and put it out again. Now, reposting also works across platforms. And while this isn't the most strategic way to kind of get your content out on multiple different platforms, it is a way to start to build consistency on a new platform if it's something that you want to try. So for instance, right now, for me, TikTok is a platform that while it's my largest audience, I just cannot dedicate a separate strategy to. So I'm creating content specifically for other platforms and I will simply repost on TikTok. I'm really not making major adjustments to the video. I might occasionally, like I said, tweak the caption a little bit or maybe add a few more hashtags to fit the platform. But overall, the visual, the video that I'm creating, I'm not giving it a second thought. I'm taking it from Instagram, I'm taking it from a YouTube video and simply putting it out on TikTok. Now, when it comes to reusing a piece of content, it's using the same content, the same concept over and over again with a little bit of tweaking required. So maybe this looks like taking an old Instagram post that performed really well for you, and maybe it was a feed post, and it was like a longer format, maybe you had a longer caption, and somehow adapting it into an Instagram carousel this time. It could be the same content, could be the same messaging, but you're simply adjusting the formatting of it a bit. Or sometimes what I've noticed people will do is they'll record a video, whether it's talking to camera or B-roll, and they will take that same video, upload it to TikTok, upload it to Instagram, and use the different editing features and text features in those apps to make it look a bit more native, but it is the same visual. They're just maybe using TikTok text and TikTok sound over here, and they're using Instagram text and Instagram sound over here, but maybe the text that is on the screen is identical. And probably one of my favorite ways to reuse content that is actually very, very low lift is I will test out a thought, a quote, an idea over on Threads because I can simply just type it out real quick, hit post, see how it does. If it tends to perform well, what I will do is actually take a screenshot of it, bring it into Canva, maybe add some branding elements to it, and export it as a graphic that can now be on my Instagram feed. It can be on LinkedIn. I can put it out in multiple different places. So just know that reusing content isn't as simple as reposting, but it is a little bit more beneficial to custom tailor content to different platforms. Now, repurposing is actually the most strategic of these, but it does take a little bit of time, energy, effort, money, skill set. Typically, when it comes to repurposing, you are trying to get as much life out of a piece of content as you can, and either that requires you to learn more skills, spend more time doing so, or even outsourcing part of it. And my hero content strategy that I mentioned before, that is the perfect example of content repurposing, where I'm taking a long form piece of content that I put so much time and energy into, And basically, we are extracting ideas out of that to feed short form platforms or to feed my newsletter, feed my blog post. Sometimes we rip the audio from these YouTube videos and put them out as podcast. So you are basically taking a concept, you are taking a piece of content and adjusting it as much as you can to the nuances, the culture, the formats of different platforms. Now, this doesn't always have to be a cross promotion effort across platforms. You can even repurpose your content on a platform like Instagram, since there are so many different ways to post. Let's say one day it's an Instagram reel of you talking to camera. The next day, you can take that idea of like whatever it was talking to camera and you create it as more of an informational or educational carousel. And then the next day, you pull out like a quote and you put it on Instagram stories. And then the day after that, it can easily become a topic for an Instagram live. But you can see how you're taking that concept or that idea and molding it and shaping it to fit a new foundation. So I know that was a lot of information, but the key point that I want you to understand after watching this video is that repeating yourself is actually what's going to lead to success. And just know that tackling some of these fears and some of these things that come up for you is only going to help you in the long run. We want to give our audiences clarity and consistency and not confusion. And repetition is going to be the key way of doing that. So my challenge to you is for the next week, I want you to only focus on one core message, one topic, one content idea, and see how much you can mold and shape it to your content creation and whatever you're putting out online, and really just hone in on that in new and different ways. Other than that, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will see you guys next week.